I'm Faye Waterman. This is A Conversation with Faye. My guest on for today, Dianna Jacobsen, who is the founder and CEO of Shine at Business. And Dianna's tip today, she's going to be talking about mindset and finance. Now, Dianna, welcome and thank you for your time. I know you're very busy. So,
Thanks, Faye.
Mindset and finance, how does that go together?
Yes, it's one of those seemingly opposite ends of the scale, but they're not, because we can only ever create and attract anything that marries into our self-image. So we need to change our mindset before we can change whether it's our money, our health, relationships, whatever it is that we're trying to bring into manifestation or the material world. We need to be able to see it and imagine it and feel it with our mindset first.
And you said something about self-image. What do you mean there? Mindset and self-image. What do you mean there?
So many of us have a self-image around struggle, the battler, a lack or a scarcity mentality. In Australia, there's very much the tall poppy syndrome, where we don't want to be seen as outdoing anybody else, or we get knocked down if we are seen as going better than someone else. So it's not about being conspicuous in it, but it is about changing how we see and feel and talk about ourselves, because until we change that sense of ourself, the reality won't change, or if it does, it's fleeting, it's not sustained.
It's interesting because, you know, you said tall poppy syndrome, and it is the only place in the world that we have that. And I remember someone telling me, and I can't remember where it comes from or why it even exists, because you know what? When someone's successful, you should be happy for them.
That's right. There's a line between being successful and skiting or bragging about it. So this isn't about conspicuous consumption. It's not about being superior or competing or outdoing other people or showing that you're better than them. But it's about changing our own self-talk and our own self-image, and maybe just not talking as much about the struggle or about being a victim or, you know, being ripped off and poor us, because we're actually creating more of that.
And when you talk about that, people will listen to you for a little while and give you a little bit of sympathy. But if you go on about it for such a long time, they'll just shut off.
Out.
Yeah, they'll shut off from that. So with mindset, what sort of things do we need to be aware of with that and finances? What's the correlation there, Dianna?
It's about, for a start, putting it out. Just, this isn't stuff you need to go and share with people or advertise or be out there about, but just changing that picture for yourself, having a vision board, having that self-belief and the faith versus the fear, because what you create in your mind will then follow in the reality. But while you're undermining yourself with lack, scarcity, poverty, victim, problems, challenges, struggle, and so on, then there's no way you can create anything different than that.
Yeah. And it's like I said before we came on air, get out of your head. Get out of your head and get into your heart and really think about it. And I was listening to Dr. Wayne Dyer this morning, and he said something, you know, to the words of, you bring about what you think about. So your thoughts bring you the results. And if you're thinking negatively, then you get negative results. If you're thinking positively, they will come to you.
That's right. And look, a couple of points. The great part is this is open to anybody. This doesn't matter where you're starting from, because people will say this is not realistic because they can't see it yet. But neither was the aeroplane, the car, the computer, the iPhone, and so on. None of that was realistic at some point either. So this is about what you can visualize and imagine and feel and connect to inside before it can be created on the outside. So when people say that's not realistic, all it means is it hasn't reached actuality yet. But if you stick to this, it will. And, you know, I've done this with thousands of people over 20-something years. So it can be done.
And it is a process. It's actually getting rid of those habits that you've had for such a long time that you weren't aware of. And when there's an awareness there of something, you can change it, but you can't change it unless you're aware of it.
Correct.
So you continue it on, don't you?
Absolutely. And the great news is anyone can do this, because this isn't about so much about how much comes in terms of income level. It's about how much goes out or how much leaks out with that sabotaging that we're doing to our thinking. So an example that I had the other day, I spoke with a client and she'd needed something in a hurry and the price tag said $160. And she went, yeah, fine, I need it. I need to get out the door. I need to be at wherever I need to be. And when she lined up, they said $30. And she said, are you really sure? And they said, yes, today that rack or that shelf or whatever. So they're the things that we sabotage ourselves by. It's not necessarily what comes in, but it's also all the little leakages that just come about to prove to ourselves what we believe our reality is.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we get so self-absorbed sometimes and we can be so emotional about different things that we block the real stuff that can happen.
That's right. And so you mentioned Wayne Dyer, and he's a great mentor of mine as well. He's got a book, one of his books, the earliest one actually, is called Stop the Excuses. And he says in that, don't believe everything that you think. Remove habitual thinking and change those old habits, because the only thing that keeps us stuck into the same result that we label reality is the same thinking. You keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, you know, that's crazy. So there's a list of 7 points that he says, which is a new way of looking at changing old things. So it's about getting out of our own way.
Getting out of our head and really starting to think about who we are, what we want, where we want to be, and start creating it. Like it's setting your goals, changing your mindset. And we can have what we want. It may not necessarily come immediately, but you've got to take those steps to get there, don't you?
That's right. And for most people, what they don't realise is not getting what they want isn't about not knowing what they want. It's about the continual blockages from the old thinking of what they don't want and the things that they say or think or feel. So, you know, we need to look at where did these excuses come from? What's our belief? And what is that reflecting to us? How is that serving us? And is it true? You know, so we can change that. We only think. We believe our thoughts, and our thoughts are only what's in front of us at the moment. So if we change our thinking, we can create something different in front of us at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment. But a lot of those thoughts come from past thinking too, and past events, you could say, that bring us to this present moment, and we're still thinking about them. And sometimes we say, that's my lot in life. I won't, you know, nothing's going to change for me. So I may as well just go on the way I am, when you don't have to at all.
And forgive me, and with due respect to the listeners, that's a cop-out. Because
an excuse?
I'm here to say I have seen the most amazing turnaround, both in people in my own sphere that I've worked with or witnessed, and of course, you know, other instances in the fight, you know, further afield. But my point is exactly what you said. People anchor onto, you know, the divorce or the bankruptcy, or I lost my job, or this happened, or there was, you know, lockdown, or blah, blah, blah. My question is, who would I be without that?
Amazing.
Because without that challenge, we'd be probably just doing same old, same old. You know, there's been a lot of people that have had to step sideways in the last year or two because of the challenges, and that's opened up amazing new opportunities or different ways of thinking or a new level of resilience.
It's exciting in one way, but it's scary in another when you think about it, because there are so many opportunities out there for us all It just depends on whether we want to grab hold of those opportunities and bring them toward us.
That's right. And they are scary. And we've talked before, I think, about good scary versus bad scary. So bad scary is, don't step in front of moving traffic. Good scary is calculated risks, following a mentor or a role model or getting some advice, but then going ahead with that leap of faith. And that's what a lot of people have had to do in the last couple of years, whether they wanted to or not. And it's paid off for a lot of people. I realise that, I'm acknowledging that there's still a lot of people in different levels of discomfort, but, some people that just were thrown into taking that leap of faith, they've had to step into what we call the terror barrier and beyond it, and they didn't have the opportunity to go and hide under their comfortable rock, which is what we tend to do when we get that scary feeling. We think, oh, that's a sign not to do it. Well, often it's a sign of we just want to go back to our old beliefs and our old habits, and we don't want to step outside of that, and we should push on through. But it's a matter of knowing, the difference between good scary and bad scary.
Sometimes we can't tell the difference between good scary and bad scary because we might be in an emotional state where we can't think logically or realistically about anything because it's so overwhelming for people. How do they step out of that, or what do they do to step out of that situation?
So that's where I'd be saying you don't do this on your own. You follow someone that's done it before. You go and get some advice on it, whether that's financial advice, whether it's a role model, a business coach, a mentor. It's a calculated risk. It's not a foolhardy, I can conquer the world and I can step in front of moving traffic kind of a risk. It's something that I'll not do the feasibility on it for so many years that it never happens. At some point there is the leap of faith, but it's the educated risk, the calculated risk based on some guidance from someone else. And particularly when we can't get out of our own head or out of our own way, or we're caught up in the, is this a gut feel or a head thing, or what's blocking me, to go and talk to someone else.
Yeah, and it's always better when you've got two heads, is better than having just one, because the stories that you've created just keep going around and around until someone you're having a conversation with says, just wait a minute, how about thinking about it this way? Or did you think about that? Or stop making excuses and get out of your head and do what you're supposed to be doing.
Which brings us back to the point of what we think is not truth.
99% of the time, that's real, isn't it?
It is. It's our story, it's our interpretation, our perception as taken through our filters, our lenses, which are our beliefs or our conditioning or what we've grown up with or our fears. And that's where, by getting some guidance, whether it's in business, whether it's in finance, whether it's in fitness or health or whatever it might be, because that other person isn't swayed by your conditioning and they'll put it a lot more, independently.
Yeah. And there was something that came up then. It's really interesting because when you do have conversations with others, and it's really important to find someone that you can trust, someone who's going to be honest with you and not sort of beat around the bush and not really tell you what they're thinking or what you need to be thinking. Someone that has had experience.
That's right. Someone who's done it,
yes,
not just talked about it.
Yeah, so that they can then give examples of what they've experienced, and if they see what you've been doing, and they can say, well, okay, this is what happened to me when I was doing that, and how I changed that was da-da-da-da-da,
And if they're an advisor in a particular area, it won't be just their experience. They'll be drawing on, a broad scope of different people and personalities and situations to be able to look at your own situation, whether it's in finance and business or health and fitness or whatever it might be, and just nail it straight away with what is going to work or not work for you because of their expertise.
And there are so many people out there that are so willing to share their wisdom and expertise with you when you need help. And the thing is that I think, and I'm speaking from experience here, it's that part of allowing yourself to ask for help.
Yes, allowing to ask, allowing to receive is a big one, because, again, if we've got a bit of a lack or a scarcity mentality, then most of the time there's a blockage to receiving.
Yes.
And it could be a childhood thing about don't be selfish, or don't take more of than your share, or don't take something that you haven't paid for, or whatever it might be. And we actually block ourselves from receiving. So like I said, it's not so much about what we create for ourselves, it's about what we allow to come in and what we allow to stay, whether money, health, whatever, relationships.
Dianna Jacobsen here, talking about mindset and finance. And we, talking about asking and allowing to receive and all those sorts of things. Dianna, what else is there around mindset that blocks us from the finances, or that lack of? What is it that we need to be aware of?
So all the work I do, I start with one key question, and that is, who is the wealthy you? Because wealth,
what does that mean?
Exactly. What does it mean? And we make it about money because money is measurable. Money is a scorecard. We can't measure, and nor do we tend to talk about quality of relationships or health or those things that are way more qualitative than quantitative, but we can measure money on the bank statement or the profit and loss statement or whatever it might be. But wealth is so much more than that. It is the quality of our relationships. It is the fact that we can make choices, that we can live where we want, we can walk in nature, we can listen to whatever music and enjoy, artwork or hobbies or friends or religions or vocations. All of these things is all part of the fabric that makes up the wealthy us. And yet we make it about money. So anyone who's got any issues from childhood about money or maths or numbers or budgets or any of those sorts of things, straight away puts a big barrier up. So we need to get rid of that first.
Budgets. I hate that word.
I know, it's terrible. It's like diet.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's just like budget. Oh, don't even talk to me about it.
Exactly. But
It's
straight away, wealth brings up all sorts of connotations. So I would first say to the listeners, what does wealth bring? The word wealth or you being wealthy bring up blockages around maths or numbers or whatever. And sometimes it's about wealthy people aren't nice, or they're ruthless, or they're whatever. Just have a look at what that is for you, and then ask, is that true of you? Because so often that can be the unblocker first.
Yeah, and wealth just doesn't mean finances. It means your health, your well-being, the abundance that you have. And we all have a certain amount of abundance, some more than others. But what is abundance? It's the flowers in the garden. It's the walk along the beach. It's riding your bike, all those sorts of things.
Hearing your children laugh, hearing the birds sing. It's having choices. It's living in a free country. It's all of those things that we forget because they're not measurable and we take them for granted. Yeah. It's having, a safe place to live and a warm bed and, heating or air conditioning and, all of those sorts of things that we just forget. But so we start with saying, who is the wealthy you? And then we look at that self-image and where are the little tweaks that we need to make. So where are the little parts that are being reflected back that we must have a belief about, whether it's that scarcity, whether it's victim, whether it's a health issue or a weight issue or a relationship or a job. But whatever's reflecting back, there must be some belief around that. And then I would say stop the excuses.
and we can have many of those, can't we?
We do. And they're the stories in our head. It's not realistic, or I can't do that, or, all of those things.
They
trip us up.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we can make all the excuses under the sun, but the only person that it's affecting is us. It's not affecting anyone else.
That's right. That's right.
And if we can't get out of our own way, then we deserve to stay where we are.
So there's a couple of things that we can do. It's all very well to say don't do this, but unless we replace that with something else, we can't just remove that. So working on the self-image and recognizing any of the little glitchy bits and displacing them, replacing them with something else. So if we hear ourselves saying, I can't have that, or I can't afford that, or I don't have that money, change those to I'll create that, or I choose not to at this point in time, where you're leaving yourself open to something that becomes a bit more positive and not disempowering.
It's interesting when you hear people say, I can't afford that. And I think, no, it's not a matter of affording it. Is it a priority at this time? Is it a need at this time? Or is it a want? And just say, as you just said, it's not the right time for it right now. Or, okay, down the track a little bit, I'm not quite ready for it, or whatever it might be.
That's right. And just to give people some context, I grew up on a farm, a broadacre wheat and sheep farm. There was no spare money. I get that. And then I've been on my own when my kids were little, self-employed single mum. So I'm not coming from a place of there's always been plenty and I'm being invalidating people's situations, or this is textbook stuff. I get where people are starting, but I'm also here to say wherever you are, that's okay. You can start from there and it works.
And it does work, because we've seen it work, haven't we?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. What else is there?
Well, I've got a little list here, and it comes from The Master Key to Riches, which was something from Napoleon Hill from a long time ago, but it is still very valid. And it's a list of 17 principles. So again, I wanted to give the listeners something that they can do rather than just sort of what they can't do.
Okay.
So these are just things like learning from defeat, having a creative vision, having personal initiative, self-discipline, concentrate on your endeavour, like where are you focusing, where are you heading, enthusiasm, budgeting time and money, do unto others as you'd like done unto you, having faith, a concept that's called the mastermind, meaning, what we said before, work with others who've been there, done that. The habit of going the extra mile. And I think that's a really important one, because we are very conditioned of, I'll only give, tit for tat and I won't give anything else. And while, yes, there's a sense of fair exchange of value, when we give that little more, it ripples out into the world we know not where, but it also comes back in other ways. And I think it's actually the first in his list, and it would be the first in my list as well. There are, things like cooperation, definite purpose, because this is where we get wishy-washy. We put a goal out for something, we don't get it in the first day, so we lose faith and we go on, it doesn't work. And all we've done is actually veto it.
You've got to be persistent, don't you?
That's right. Well, at least consistent. Like this is the goal and we don't know when it's going to show up, but at least if we're consistently heading towards it, then we're not sabotaging it and then saying with some kind of morose satisfaction that it doesn't work.
Consistency and persistence, they're kind of the same thing, aren't they? Really.
And something from Wallace Wattles' Science of Getting Rich that is very valid today, it's doing things in a certain way. So again, it's not about how much money we earn or what sort of job we're in. It's the mental faculties, the thinking, the discipline, the willpower, the reasoning, the rationale that we bring to that, to focus on that we want to create. What we put out is what we'll create. So if we're putting out lack, fear, scarcity, disbelief that it will happen, then unfortunately that's what we create for ourselves. And it's not a matter of environment. We can live in any street, in any neighbourhood, doing any vocation, and it's about the consistent habitual behaviours and thinking. I'd encourage people to look at the book called The Richest Man in Babylon, where, as we've always taught, you work in percentages. So it's not about the dollar amounts, but it's about paying yourself first. It's about managing your finances in terms of percentages. And if that's $1 or $5, that's okay. That works as well. I'm here to say we've turned around lives with $1 a week going here, there and everywhere. So it's about, you can thrive anywhere. It's based on your inside thinking, not your outside actuality.
So it comes from within. We've got those outside circumstances where we can be influenced, but the real influences come from within us, not from without. Yeah.
That's right. And that's where we get so caught up, and it's part of our society as well, particularly in the Western world, where we measure everything by what we see outside. Money in the bank, the kind of car we drive, whatever brand clothes we wear, what school our kids go to, what our house looks like, what suburb we're in, all of these sorts of things we measure, and we take that as a sign of success or failure, whereas really we need to be building the vision from the inside.
And what's success to someone else may not be success to another person, or failure. There's nothing wrong with failing as long as you don't keep failing with the same thing over and over again.
That's right, because that's just learning what didn't work. So let's not do that part again.
Yeah.
And we're also taught, and the school system, particularly in years gone by, mistake is bad. And therefore people don't try because they're worried that they'll make a mistake. And yet a mistake is just working out what didn't work. And if we're too fearful to try anything, then nobody will ever change anything, because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But, there's a saying about fail faster. Okay, try something, and if it didn't work, we can cross that off and we can try something different. But it's about taking that step of faith.
Yeah, and failure it's not about being embarrassed about failing. It's about learning the lesson of why it didn't work, or you may not know that, but what did you learn from that, and what can you take on to something else? And it's that fear, that we have of failing, the embarrassment, the shame, when that doesn't matter at all, really, does it?
No, and really that fear is about stepping outside what's familiar. So our reptilian brain has kept us safe by staying in the boundaries that we've always stayed in. So that fear when we're going to do something different is really saying, don't change because I don't know if you'll be safe. And there's the difference between good scary and bad scary, between being foolhardy and taking some, ridiculous step, or risking all your money on some crazy investment, as opposed to a calculated step with guidance and, mentorship to try something new. Either way, you'll have that fear, but it's about being sensible in where you're stepping into that. But it's also about being willing to step into it.
Yeah, and also, not just doing it on your own, because you can have the support of someone in the background looking at what you're doing. You can be taking those steps, and when you're not sure about something, you can come and ask. Or if they're watching on, they can see something and say, okay, you need to be aware of this, or this may not work, so what's your option here? So asking or making them aware, it's creating that awareness.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say, you said before about allowing for support and receiving. And the other thing I would say is paying for good advice. I come across people that have been in struggle for years, and occasionally I'll be invited by family to work with elderly people that may have already missed the age cutoffs for age pension or whatever, because they wouldn't pay to get some advice. I worked with a lady recently and she's in her 80s. We now can't set up the framework that she would have needed to be eligible for some benefits, some home help, some support and some care, because she didn't ever want to pay for any financial advice during the age bracket where we could have set that up. The family are now trying to sort it out, but at any age there is no point staying in struggle or thinking that if I keep doing it my way, eventually it might work, if you don't know what you're doing and that way hasn't worked
in the past. Yeah,
that's right. Weigh up value for money. Don't go and throw a lot of money ridiculously. Ask your friends who they go to for accounting or financial advice or business coaching or whatever it might be, but be willing to put some investment into yourself to do something differently and get the outcome, rather than just complaining that nothing's working.
You have to be prepared to put in some investment to get a result. It doesn't matter what it is that you actually do. There's an investment in everything that we do in every day, every action.
That's right.
And whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's a conversation, whether it could be anything. But we have to invest. And I think if you need to get some good advice, you know, for taking steps in big areas in your life that are important and are going to affect you down the track, then you need to pay for it.
That's right. I mean, there's a lot of information on the internet. There's a lot of free stuff. Start with that. But at the same time, be mindful and filter out what's just maybe a lot of hype or maybe selling you something or a system versus what is real and grounded.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone before and they said, don't rely on Google. Go and get some good advice. I mean, that's Google has so many opinions, and that's many people's opinions. And unless it's
not all valid.
No, it's not all valid. And unless it's been published by a reputable organisation or whatever, then Google is just an opinion.
And certainly with financial things in Australia, we have very, very regulated financial services regime. So it's important that you look for the credentials, whether the people are a CPA or whatever they might be. Make sure that they've got the credentials before you take that advice from them.
Yeah. You know, you sort of, when you're in a heightened state and you want to get some information because you really want to do something but you're not sure about it, you have to find someone who you can trust.
Yeah.
And who, can show their qualifications, their credentials and experience. Look at the experience that they've actually had and find people who have worked with them to see what results they've got. You've got to be responsible for your own wealth and well-being.
That's right. Ask your friends or read testimonials for companies you're looking at.
So what other, because we're coming toward the end of the show, what other advice would you give if someone was to be thinking about starting a business, going into a business, retiring from a business or work or something like that? What sort of advice would you give them?
I'm going to step slightly sideways from your question, Faye, which I hope is all right, because with all of those things that you've just said, I'd still be saying go and find a reputable accountant to get guided by. But with the mindset and the money, and it can be going into business, it certainly has an impact on how your business goes or at any other age and stage. At the end of the day, it's about us feeling worthy, valid, valued, heard, and deserving. And that starts with us, and hence self-image. So there's a little scale. There's a fabulous book called Care by a lady called Brooke McAlary, and she talks about this scale of self-care on one end, which not to be confused with overindulgent or self-indulgent, big care on the other end, which is the big world issues that we worry about, and everything in the middle is small care, things that we do for ourselves, our families, our communities, our neighbours, our colleagues. And I would say really work in that space because that builds our own self-image, our self-worth, our deservedness, and then money and other manifestations will flow.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dianna. As usual, great wealth of information. I'm Faye Waterman, and this has been a conversation with Faye.